Hello, everyone. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast, and wow, did that week go by fast? If you're tuning in for the first time, as I said, my name's Dara Bunjon. My background, food stylist, food writer, PR maven, and frustrated baker. This week, I am thrilled to have a close friend of mine, Jeffrey Spear of Studio Spear, and author of a brand new book called My Life in Gluttony, a Culinary Adventure, onto the show. His story starts in his hometown, Baltimore, Pikesville, and it traces all through his travels from Serbia, Buenos Aires, Lebanon, Australia. So I call him the Anthony Bourdain of Baltimore. He's been to so many places and eaten many places. Hi, Jeffrey. How are you today down in Jacksonville Beach?
Hey, Derek. It's sunny, surf's up. All good.
All good. Yeah, I should be down there now, but we all know about Florida, but we won't go there.
That's down
south. I said, I call you like the Tony Bourdain of Baltimore. You love food, you've traveled, and we're going to show the book, author of My Life in Gluttony. And in the book, a lot of it alleges how you like hot dogs and things of that nature. And Tony Bourdain was a big fan of tubular food. How did that come? I mean, what hot dogs? How did this get started? Tell us why you started this book.
So in my work at Studio Spear, Studio Spear is a food and beverage oriented branding agency, and we work with all kinds of producers. We've worked with, if you know, Maple Leaf Farms for the duck. We've worked with Anheuser-Busch, lots of different companies around this country. But I was invited to start working globally through USAID, which is a non-military funding. It's economic funding to emerging countries that are considered emerging economies. And I'm traveling to all these esoteric places, and my friends started saying, "Hey, Jeff, you're talking about all these foods that you have. Why don't you write a cookbook?" Well, I didn't want to write a cookbook, but I wrote a memoir because I realized that throughout my life, these places that I'm going to, there were always foods that I found remarkable and made a lasting impression. Now, where the hot dog thing started, I'm not exactly sure, but I will tell you that I never go to New York without having a hot dog from a cart somewhere, and it's got to be Sabret's or Nathan's. I have half smokes when I'm in DC. When I'm in LA, I go to Pink's. If you guys know LA, Pink's is a great place for a chili dog. It's just one of those foods that I gravitate towards.
So the book, before I forget about it, where it's a great memoir and takes you around the world, and some of those places, Jeff and I have been friends for, let's say, 20 years. He'd say, "I'm going to Malawi. I had to look up. I had no clue. So I've learned geography through his trips. But there are 96 recipes. One of the ones I don't think that you ate, and you put a variation on from Malawi, is the mouse on a stick.
Charred grilled mouse. So let me tell that story because it's probably the best story I've got. I'm working in Malawi. First off, relative to the geography, I now keep Google Earth on my desktop because I get these calls. "Hey, Jeff, do you want to go do a consulting gig over here?" And I'm going, "Where the hell is that place?" And so I have to look it up while I'm on the phone. And so, "Oh, that's where it is." Okay. Anyway, I go to Malawi. I've never been there. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's on the southeastern part of Africa. It's right next to Mozambique. And it's a tiny little country, and it's arguably one of the poorest. I think it's among of the three poorest countries in the world. It's one of them. And so there's Lake Malawi, which is about the size of one of our Great Lakes, and it's one of the primary tourist destinations for folks in that area. And so one of my clients said, "Hey, Jeff, I'll drive you out to Lake Malawi, and we'll just spend the day there." And so we're driving, and it's about a 2-hour drive, and we're going through these tiny little towns. And as you approach the commercial centers of these towns, there are these guys holding what look like yardsticks, a bunch of them, and they're kind of splayed out. So they're just got their hand up, and and it's like Sylvester or it's like Tweety Bird in the cartoons. In the oh, I thought I saw a booty tap. Well, we're driving by, and it's like yeah, and I go, what the hell was that? And I'm going, I think I know what I saw, but I'm not sure. So I waited till the next town. We're driving in, and sure enough, I'm looking really carefully as we're driving by, and they're holding these sticks, and they're about a meter long. Some of them are short, and they've got mice lashed onto them, and they're grilled. And I've since found out that they eat them cold. You know, they're grilled, and then they lash them on the stick, and they sell them by the stick, or you can buy 1 or 2 mice, I guess. And they eat them the same way we eat jerky. I would not try them because I'm not sure what the hygiene issues are. I don't know where these mice came from. I don't know what conditions they're cooked under. And being a temporary visitor, my stomach is just not prepared for that. But definitely intriguing. And when I was developing the recipe, I was trying to find a recipe for how do you cook mice. And it turns out that in Thailand, there are mice that live in the coconut palms, and the mice feed on the coconuts. And so they're actually fairly clean. And in Thailand, they make these marinated coconut gorging mice. And so I based my recipe on that, and that's what's in the book.
Right, but it's not mice. It's like anything else. It's chicken.
It's chicken tenders.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have greetings from Jeannie Siegel. She's saying hi to you and I.
Hi, Jeannie.
So hi, Jeannie. She's my co-producer of the show. We meet up and eat talk about the show. You had a quote in the book, you know, let's talk about the title. Living to eat is no longer an admission of gluttony or a problem with self-control. It has, in fact, become a badge of honor.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was a kid growing up, I was a fat kid. And the kids at school would tease me. And I remember there was this one guy, and I know his name, but will not mention. He's Pikesville. He was Pikesville. And he used to tease me, and he'd go, "Hey, Spear, do you live to eat or do you eat to live?" And I was too young. I didn't really understand what he was asking me, but I knew he was teasing me because I was a fat kid. And over the years, I just said, you know, I'm just going to ignore that. But ever since the Food Channel came around and everybody's eating and taking pictures and gluttony is more of a thing, you know, I was like, you know, I can say, hey, I'm a self-confessed glutton, you know, and you know, I'm proud of. Look, I'm not proud of my waistline, but I'm proud of my cooking prowess that's come about as a result, and I'm proud of the business that I've managed to accomplish. Support the economic support I brought to some of these emerging economies around the world. It's great stuff.
We've been known as going out and, you know, drinking here, eating there, eating there. We sort of go around. I think people should know that you're in Jacksonville Beach and that you do a lot of food columns, reviews down in Jacksonville. Yeah. And you're also a columnist from time to time on Plate Magazine and
That's
other
right.
assorted publications. But you really started off more as a graphic artist, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm a designer by training. At one point, I tried to actually give it up and just be a fine artist and sell my work. And I learned why the expression starving artists exists. And so I gave that up. I mean, I've got lots of art. If anybody wants some art for their walls, I've got stuff. But I do food and beverage branding. Right now, I'm working in the country of Georgia, and we're working with nut producers, berry growers, dried fruit producers, all kinds of different food categories, helping them develop export programs. And then domestically, I work with Beaver Street Fisheries, which is one of the larger frozen food suppliers in the country. But it's a long way off from design.
It is, but you did do all this design and the layout on the book.
Oh, I am still a designer. Yeah.
Right. My Life in Gluttony, a culinary adventure by Jeffrey Spear, is available on Amazon.com, and that's already floated up in the notes for the show. All you need to know is go to Amazon.com. If you want to reach Jeffrey before I forget, studiospear.com, and you can reach him through the information column on the website. So let's talk about some of the hometown foods. I thought it was very interesting. When was that aha moment that you went, oh boy, food? Was that
Well,
something to do with Boy Scouts?
well, so what happened is I'm in Boy Scouts, and you got to jump through all these hoops to get your various badges and ranking, and one of the things you had to do was cook on a cookout. And so I had this Boy Scout handbook, and they had these dozen or so recipes in it, and one of them was tuna noodle casserole, and the other one was fruit compote. And I said, and they were easy enough. And I didn't start doing serious culinary training until I was in my mid-30s. So growing up, I knew I liked food because my parents taught me to go out to good restaurants and enjoy good food, appreciate good food. But in the Boy Scouts, I made tuna noodle casserole. And I came home, and it was what, cream of mushroom soup, a can of tuna. You cook up some noodles, you sprinkle some cornflakes on top, you put it on top of the fire, and you let it cook until it gets hot. And I came home, and my mom being a scratch cook, and I go, "Ma, you got to start making tuna noodle casserole." And she goes, "Here I am beating myself up, cooking from scratch, and you want tuna noodle casserole." She never made it for me. She just said, "No, I won't do it."
Well, I met you when I worked at Van Spices,
Mm.
and you came in to talk to them about marketing and things of that nature. And for whatever reason, you saw something that I did, and you reached out to me. You came over to the house, and I said, "Do you want some chopped liver?"
And
we were
we've been
friends
friends ever since.
ever since. Where were you that it didn't make sense? Was it the Parpadella recipe? It was not Italy. And the recipe was the Parpadella
Yeah.
with the meat sauce.
Yeah. So I don't recall off the top of my head. It's either Serbia or Montenegro. And what's important to realize is that part of the country, this is former Yugoslavia, by the way, because when I went to Serbia, I didn't know where I was going. It's very close to Italy, and the Italian influence is very strong. And so the Italian restaurants there have some of the best damn Italian food I have ever had. And one of the things that I had repeatedly was there was either I had a tortellini with meat sauce in Montenegro that the best bolognese I've ever had. And then there was just these various configurations of what I call beef ragu, or just ragu, which is a meat sauce or a sugo. And I paid attention to what I was eating and what the flavors were, and I learned how to make it. And the recipe in the book, I'm pretty proud of. I would be happy to go back to either Montenegro or Serbia to have it there. In fact, the guy in Montenegro, the man that I was working with who lived there full time, he would take me with him to go to this restaurant. And every time we showed up, he and the owner were best friends. And his name was Fred. "Hey, Fred, how are you?" And he'd hug him, and he didn't know who I was. He'd hug me, and we'd have our meal. And then he said, "Oh, you got to have," and he'd bring out this homemade limoncello. That's where I got exposed to limoncello. I now know how to make it. It's a pain in the butt. It's easy, but it's a pain in the butt.
Is it a matter of patience or just?
Yeah, it's patience, because you first you have to peel down a gazillion lemons to get the rind, and then every day you have to you marinate in the grain alcohol, and you marinate with sugar, and you have to every day. Look, the result is good. The recipe's in the book. It's just how much limoncello am I going to drink? When I made it, I got it was a World Market, had limoncello bottles, those long, thin things. And I just funneled a whole bunch of it into, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen bottles, and I gifted it all.
I have some that somebody has given me a ways back. Michael Burchanel, may he rest in peace, from Food Service Monthly. Yeah. He gave me some that he made.
Yeah.
You lived for quite a bit of time in Australia.
Yeah.
And what are bay bugs?
So if you go up into north of Sydney, heading up into Brisbane and around that area, all the Australians, "Hey mate, you got to have some bugs." And what it is they're Moreton Bay bugs, because it's the Moreton Bay, which is, I think it's outside of Brisbane, and they're slipper lobster, and they're about the size of a good sized Maryland crab, but it's a lobster. You can, if you search them, you'll see, and you only eat the tail. There's the body and the tail is what you eat. And they're quite good. That calling them bugs is kind of off-putting. You know, it's like, hey, you want some grilled mice? But they're delicious. And just like in Maryland, you know, you drive down the road and you see the guys that are selling steamed crabs on the side of the road or selling steamed shrimp or something. In this part of Australia, you drive down the road and they've got the steamed bugs on some guy with a little pickup. And I'm game. And I like these things. So I stopped and I bought a kilo, which is 2.5 pounds of these things. And I'm driving back to Sydney. It's a several hour drive. And while I'm driving, knee holding the wheel, I'm selling these things and eating as I go. But they're fabulous. And when you go to the restaurants that really do a good job with them, they do them in, I mean, think of any kind of sauces that you might do with seafood, you know, right. So it's a white wine sauce, a butter sauce, you know, Mornay, anything, you know, hollandaise, and all these different configurations, and it's fabulous. It's now my all-time favorite seafood. It used to be lobster. And I was at a buffet in Australia, and it was a seafood buffet, all you could eat. And they had lobster, and they also had bug. And I loaded up my plate with lobster, and then I realized, wait a minute, they've got bug here. What am I wasting my time on lobster for? And I threw out the lobster and got the bug.
How could you throw out lobster?
Well, because bugs are that much better.
What was it? I'm just going to divert a little bit to tell people. Jeffrey and I worked on a book for called Yum, Tasty Recipes, Culinary Greats. It was underwritten by the people who do the microplane. And we had to test the recipes, and we worked with the Pro Start program through the high schools. And I just remember these kids, and what we do, like 5 steamed lobsters.
Yeah, I remember that there was the one kid, he had never had lobster, and he was afraid to try it. Yeah, that was fun.
It was high school students, and it was out in not a very affluent. Yeah, it's not an affluent neighborhood to say. So some of these things that the kids saw they were sort of taken back. Yeah. But you know, it was an education for them. It was an education for us. And Vince Lupo, who's a great photographer, was in one of the rooms, and we bring the food over and do that. But I remember we had like 5 lobsters, and we were both in heaven on that one.
And I'm not a big fan of truffles, but one of the recipes, I think it was that egg dish from the guy in San Francisco. I forget his name, but it called for some shaved truffle. And we had a couple of recipes that called for shaved truffle. And I remember you were coveting the lump of truffle because you wanted that when it was done, and we were both coveting the lobster.
Right. Well, you know, we got to try that. The last couple of recipes we did at the house because we used the charcoal grill, and Vince was here. So let's talk about, there was an interesting spice that you talked about from Georgia, Camille Sanel.
Oh, yeah. So Georgia, this is the country of Georgia. Georgia has some spice blends there that I'm working with them right now, and this is part of the process. They want to get a geographic indication for these spice blends, saying that these are essentially a Georgian food, much the way that Parmesan is Italian and Champagne is French. They want to get it for these spice blends. And one of them is blue fenugreek, and another is a blend. They're very interesting flavors. Georgian flavors overall are quite distinctive. It's just it's like any country. If you're not familiar, you go to Japan. I'm not familiar with Japanese spices. It was the sour plum or salted plum, and there are all these ingredients. They have remarkable flavors, and you know, unless you work with them, you never find out where those flavors are coming from. That's what I'm learning. I'm still learning in Georgia. I'm supposed to be going back. I'm waiting for COVID to go away, as we all are, so I can return and I can continue my investigations, because I'm not really clear how these spices contribute to flavors. So much so that there was a recipe for a dolma, a baked dolma, that I wanted to put in the book for Georgia. And I don't throw food away. I mean, it's just, if it's edible, I'll eat it. And the opportunities or the situations where I'll throw food away are few and far between. And I made this dolma, and the rice and the grape leaves was fine, but the sauce that I'm trying to make for it and the way it came out is like, I just had to, it's one of those rare times when down the disposal it went.
So that recipe is not in the book.
It's not in the book because I couldn't perfect it. I couldn't figure out. I had this baked dolma in Georgia and it was phenomenal. And so whenever I get back there, assuming the restaurant's still in business, I'm going back and I'm going to interview the chef and I'm going to find out how this is done. But all the recipes that I could find online, not even close.
Let's see. College in Tucson turned you on to Mexican food and tequila.
Tequila.
Yes. One of the few drinks that I do. People have seen my rants being a little bit buzzed on Facebook.
Yeah.
Dim sum. When I'm with you.
Before you leave Tucson, the other thing that I got turned on to, two things. One was biscuits and gravy, and the other was pecan pie. And the biscuits and gravy, it was a kind of a cultural thing. My mom didn't care about that, but my mom was a good pie baker. And I said, Mom, how come we never have pecan pie? And she goes, I don't like it. So those two things, I mean, I love pecan pie and biscuits and gravy. It's one of my all-time favorite food groups. Biscuits and gravy, mac and cheese, lobster, put it on a plate. I'm happy.
Yeah, well, I like lobster. I like mac and cheese. I don't like lobster in mac and cheese. I think lobster should be eaten almost as pure as possible and not covered in cheese.
Okay, but, so here's the glutton in me. If you have a lot of lobster and a lot of mac, it'll all be good.
Well, I did make your recipe. It's called the ultimate macaroni and cheese recipe. And I posted pictures online and I made, a 9x13 pan. And I'm just one person in the house. So there's still some in the freezer. But I had requests for that recipe. So I photographed it and sent it to a couple of people. But again,
I'm going to send my copyright lawyers after you.
All right. I only did a couple. But if you want it, folks, My Life in Gluttony, Culinary Adventure by Jeffrey Spear, Amazon.com, and dim sum. We have done, there isn't a dim sum place in any city that we've been in that we haven't hit.
Have to. It's a must-have.
Yeah. I think one of the things that freaks you out and some of my friends is I like chicken feet.
Chicken feet.
It's something that when I grew up, nothing went to waste because my parents were a little bit older than most of my friends. So there'd be like, I can't remember what she did. It was something in tomato sauce with chicken and chicken feet and stuff like that. Yeah. So as a child, if your parents eat something, it's got to be good. That's how I learned to like oysters. Who in their right mind? Who was that first person to look at a raw oyster and decide to eat it? But you're in Jacksonville now. And the last time I was down visiting you, just to let people know, one night we hit 2 Ethiopian restaurants. Most cities only have one. We hit 2, and then we went to a pizza place afterwards, I think.
Oh, I don't remember that.
We went for drinks, but it was sort of like a pizza place with.
Entirely possible, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, hitting 2, 3, or 4 places in one outing is not unusual.
Yeah, for us. And a number of years ago, I used to say my epitaph on my tombstone would be, "She died young, she died full." Jeffrey reminded me that I couldn't use young anymore. So, there's a lot that I can talk to Jeff about. Let's come down to my famous questions. What is your epic culinary fail? So,
when I was working on my previous book, the one before this, it's called the First Coast Heritage Cookbook, and it deals with the culinary heritage along in Jacksonville, which is called, because St. Augustine was the first city in North America that was settled, it's considered the First Coast. And the culinary influences were the indigenous tribes that were here, and then all the Europeans that came over, so the Spanish, the French, and the British, and the Africans that came with them, be them slaved for free. But the African culinary heritage is remarkable, and a lot of what is Southern cuisine is African. So I go, okay, so I'm researching all this stuff, and one of the quintessential African dishes is chitlins. And for those of you that don't know, that's intestines. So I found out, being in the South here, you can get them frozen in the grocery store. And I knew that they had to be cleaned and all this stuff, and cleaned and boiled and cleaned and boiled. And I bought it, and the package said they were already cleaned, but I didn't trust it. So I'm cooking them and boiling them. And the stench that was in this house was unbelievable. I've had smelly foods before, but this was like, And it was as if I had a little demon on this shoulder and a little demon on this one. The culinary demon on this shoulder was saying, it's okay, Jeff, just keep on going. You've had smelly foods before, keep on going. And this one's going, Jeff, it smells like an outhouse, dump it. And no, don't. No, you got it. And I had to dump it. I dumped it, and the house still reeked of that, and that scent of it. It's just outhouse smell. It was in my sinuses for weeks. And so I've never made chitlins. One of these days I will try them in a restaurant, but I haven't had the opportunity yet. But that was the absolute worst thing to ever happen in my kitchen.
Did you ever try durian?
No, but I've seen durian, because of all the Asian stores I go to, it's available. And just the smell at the store, it's like, I don't need to bring that home.
And before I forget, everyone, and it's only $18.95, Amazon.com. You can tell we're close friends. My Life in Gluttony, A Culinary Adventure by Jeffrey Spear, Amazon.com. If you want to reach Jeffrey about marketing and graphics and things of that nature.
Or talk about food.
Or talk about, you're interested in food. What a surprise. Or talk food. You can get all his contact information from studiospear.com. And last question, though we can talk a lot. I need to tell people before I forget, we have Baltimore food recipes in here: crab cake, coddies, crab dip. You talked about Peter Pan. There's so much, and the stories are fun. They're well written. Easy to read through, and COVID allowed you to finish up the book, and you self-publish. So if you enjoy cooking, you enjoy culinary memoirs, this is a book to get. So the last question, what question didn't I ask you that I should have today?
So you actually asked this question of all the chefs when we were writing Yum, and that question is, if you were sentenced to die, what would be your last meal?
Okay, Jeff. If you were sentenced to die, what would your last meal be?
Well, we've already talked about it. It's going to be lobster. It's going to be mac and cheese. Hot dog pales in comparison, or bay bugs and mac and cheese. You bring out copious quantities of that, I'd be pretty happy.
Okay, well, I'm probably pretty much along the same line. I don't mind anything with real truffle, but I can't stand truffle oil.
Oh, no.
Being in restaurants and they have truffle fries and people walk by, it attacks my olfactory senses. It's just too much for me. And, we're going to talk some more. I'm looking forward to when I can get down there. And
I can come up to Baltimore.
Right. And we can hit some of the places. The last time you were up, we did Hirsch's.
I want to go back there. Their pizza was pretty damn good.
The pizza was good. The linguine and clams was very good, spicy. I'm trying to think, where else did we go that night? We usually we went to
the Gypsy Truck Restaurant.
Oh yes, okay.
That was
all
fun.
Right.
Yeah. And the fact that your shoes were hanging on the wall.
a high heel is on a shelf.
Yes. Yeah.
And any close personal friends know what that high heel designates. Yeah. So, folks, My Life in
Thank you, Dara.
Gluttony. And I have a couple notes to follow up on. Jeffrey will be talking soon. Thank you so much,
Thanks for having
Moz.
me. Yeah. For all of you folks in Baltimore, have some crabs for me.
Okay. And let's see. I want to tell you that Vegan Week is starting August 1st and to August 9th. And I'm just trying to see, I'm reading it off. Sprouts, Great Sage, Little Havana, Miss Shirley's, Larder, Harmony, and Golden West Cafe. And Golden West Cafe also has Sunday drag queens coming in. So if you're into vegan, it's your week coming up, and all these places have made accommodation for COVID. And I just want to knock this out for my friend Cyrus Kiefer, who he and his partner have taken over this outside dining called Hungry Like the Wolf on Wolf Street, where Red Star is, and that just opened. So if you're down in Fells Point, reach in, enjoy the food. Both chefs, Cyrus was the executive chef of Fork and Wrench, and the fellow working with him was from Fork and Wrench. So the food will probably be outstanding, very casual. Hungry Like the Wolf, where Red Star is, exterior dining on Wolf Street. And next week, we're going to have Shelby Wassel on. She is a personal chef. American Personal Chefs Organization involved with that. Her company is called Shallots. And she, along with Heidi Hiller, are doing certified cooking. They're doing cooking classes online for special events. And that's what Heidi is. Hiller has been certified as an online event planner. And we're going to talk about the demand for personal chefs right now and what Shelby's doing in her cooking classes. So until next week, may your plates always remain full. You can reach me at food@jmoreliving.com. This will always be up on our Facebook page, Jmore Living, here on Facebook, or jmoreliving.com. You will find the video. Have a safe week. Wear your mask, and again, may your plates always, always remain full.